Living on the edge of farmland meant peace and quiet until the new HOA president, a woman in her mid-40s, decided my tractors didn't belong on her roads. They blocked our access route, but at 62, I've learned a thing or two about standing my ground. What would you do if entitled neighbors tried to dictate how you've run your family business for generations? I've been working this land for over 40 years now, taking over from my father, just like he took over from his father before him. 3 generations of hard work built into every acre of the soil. Our farm has stood here since 1924, long before any fancy developments even existed in this county. Things were peaceful until about 2 years ago, when Paradise Hills Estates started breaking ground next door. The developer, a smooth-talking fellow in an expensive suit, promised us they'd respect the agricultural heritage of the area. That's what they called it in their brochures, too, showcasing our farm as a charming rural backdrop to their luxury homes. At first, relations were cordial. Some new homeowners would even stop by our farm stand, commenting on how they loved having authentic country charm so close to their new homes. My wife and I would smile politely, though privately we wondered how long that sentiment would last. Well, it lasted exactly 8 months. That's when Janet Winters was elected as the new HOA president. A former real estate executive from the city, Janet ran on what she called a community modernization platform. What that really meant was transforming everything around her into something that looked like it belonged in a glossy magazine. Within weeks of taking office, Janet started sending us letters, polite at first, then increasingly demanding. Our equipment was unsightly, our early morning harvests were disruptive, the seasonal dust from our fields was hazardous to residents with allergies. It became clear that in Janet's vision of Paradise Hills, there was no room for a working farm, despite the fact we'd been here nearly a century before the first shovel of their development broke ground. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a battle that would test everything I believed about property rights, respect, and standing your ground against people who think their convenience matters more than your livelihood. The first official complaint arrived on a Tuesday morning. Janet didn't even have the courtesy to deliver it herself. Instead, she sent her assistant, a nervous young man clutching a manila envelope like it contained state secrets. Inside was a 3-page letter detailing how our tractors and harvesters were visually incompatible with the aesthetic standards of Paradise Hills. I laughed it off at first. This was farm country, after all. What did they expect to see from their back patios? But my son warned me not to dismiss it so quickly. These people have money and lawyers, he said, and they don't understand our way of life. He was right about that last part. The next HOA meeting agenda included a discussion about agricultural views visible from community properties. I decided to attend, thinking reasonable people could work out reasonable solutions. I couldn't have been more wrong. The moment I walked into that clubhouse, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare like I'd tracked manure onto their pristine carpet. Janet stood at the front, perfectly coiffed in her designer outfit, pointing to a PowerPoint slide showing my equipment storage area. This unsightly collection of industrial machinery, she said, is what our residents are forced to look at while enjoying their morning coffee. Several homeowners nodded in agreement. One woman actually shuddered. I raised my hand and calmly explained that farming requires equipment, and equipment needs somewhere to be stored. We've been operating this way for decades, I said, long before your homes were even blueprints. Janet's smile never reached her eyes. Well, things change, she replied. Our residents have invested millions in these properties, with expectations of certain standards. Despite feeling like I'd walked into an ambush, I offered compromises. We could build a decorative fence around the equipment yard. We could adjust our harvesting schedule when possible. We could even repaint some of our older machinery. Anything within reason, to be a good neighbor. For a few weeks, things seemed to improve. We installed that fence, at considerable expense, I might add, and I instructed my crew to be extra mindful of noise during early hours. I thought we'd reached an understanding. Then I discovered something that changed everything. Janet's husband, Richard, had recently been appointed to the County Zoning Commission. And their first order of business? Reviewing accessibility standards for agricultural properties adjacent to residential developments. The pieces started falling into place when a certified letter arrived from the county. Our main access road, the one we'd used for generations to move equipment between fields, was being reclassified as a non-commercial route, effective immediately. Any vehicle exceeding certain dimensions was now prohibited. This wasn't just about aesthetics anymore. This was about forcing us to change how we operated, or better yet, forcing us out completely. I tried calling the county office, but all I got was a runaround. "We're just enforcing the updated zoning regulations," they kept saying. Nobody would tell me exactly why these regulations needed updating after decades of working just fine. A week later, Janet requested a neighborly discussion at the community center. I should have known it was another trap. When I arrived, I found myself facing not just Janet, but the entire HOA board, their attorney, and a county representative. They called it a mediation, but it felt more like an inquisition. Janet's smile was tight as she handed me a document titled Operational Standards for Agricultural Activities. Inside were restrictions that would have made running my farm nearly impossible. According to their reasonable accommodations, we would only be permitted to operate machinery between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Anyone who knows farming understands that's ridiculous. Early mornings and evenings are crucial, especially during harvest season. These hours will minimize disruption to our residents, Janet explained, particularly those working from home who need quiet for their Zoom calls. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Farming isn't a 9 to 5 job," I said. "We work with the seasons and the weather, not someone's conference call schedule." The county representative, a man half my age who looked like he'd never set foot on a farm, nodded sympathetically before delivering another blow. "We've also received concerns about security," he said. "The workers using your access road aren't residents of Paradise Hills, which creates potential safety issues." I nearly lost my temper then. Those workers are the same people who've helped run this farm for years. Some of their families have worked alongside mine for generations. They're not security threats, they're skilled agricultural professionals. The HOA attorney cleared his throat. Additionally, there are insurance liability concerns with non-residential vehicles using roads maintained by HOA dues. That's when I noticed something peculiar. Janet kept exchanging glances with the county representative whenever key points came up. Later that evening, my neighbor Thomas Miller, who works at the county records office, confirmed my suspicions. Janet and the representative had met 3 times in private before this mediation. The final page of their document contained the most outrageous demand yet. They wanted me to agree to a community impact assessment before any seasonal work, essentially giving the HOA veto power over normal farming operations. "This is completely unreasonable," I told them. "My family has maintained this land for nearly a century. We've always been good stewards and neighbors." Janet's response chilled me. "Times change," she said. "Paradise Hills represents the future of this area. Perhaps it's time to consider whether traditional farming is still appropriate here." I left that meeting knowing exactly what was happening. This wasn't about noise or aesthetics or security. This was a systematic effort to make farming so difficult that selling would become my only option. Janet's real estate background suddenly made much more sense. Paradise Hills Phase 2 would look mighty nice stretching across my fields. While driving home, I found another certified letter. The county had officially reclassified our farm access road, effective immediately. Any farm equipment would now need to use alternate routes that simply didn't exist unless we cut across our own crops or used the main public roads. They thought they had me cornered, but they didn't know just how stubborn a farmer in his 60s can be when his livelihood is threatened. The final straw came on a Monday morning in early June. Harvest season was approaching fast, and I needed to move our equipment to the eastern fields. I woke at dawn as usual, only to hear my foreman, Pedro, banging on the door. panic in his voice. "They've blocked the road, boss. Completely blocked it." I grabbed my truck keys and followed him to our access road. What I saw made my blood boil. Concrete barriers had been installed overnight, the kind used for highway construction, completely cutting off the route we'd used for decades. A large sign read, "No agricultural vehicles by order of County Ordinance 47.3. This wasn't just inconvenient. It was potentially catastrophic. We had less than a week to prepare those fields before the optimal harvest window. Every day of delay would cost thousands in reduced yield. I immediately called my attorney, Frank, who'd helped us with water rights issues years ago. His response wasn't encouraging. "They've done their homework," he said, after reviewing the paperwork. "They held a special emergency session of the zoning board last night. Minimal notice, but quorum present. Technically legal, though ethically questionable. Fighting this in court would take months, maybe years." "I don't have months," I told him. "I have days before this impacts my entire season." While we were talking, Janet's silver Mercedes glided past my property line. She slowed down just enough to make eye contact through her tinted window. The smug satisfaction on her face told me everything I needed to know about who was behind this midnight maneuver. Back at the house, my entire crew waited anxiously. These weren't just employees, they were people who depended on this farm for their livelihoods. Some had been with us for decades. Pedro's father had worked alongside my father back in the 60s. "What now?" asked Miguel, our mechanic, who kept our aging equipment running against all odds. "We can't reach half the property without that access road." My son suggested cutting a new path through our western section, but that would mean destroying nearly 50 acres of crops already in the ground. The financial hit would be devastating. For the first time in 40 years of farming, I felt truly helpless. The HOA had calculated their move perfectly, striking at exactly the moment when time was our most precious commodity. They knew we couldn't afford a lengthy legal battle during harvest season. That night, I barely slept. The faces of my crew kept appearing in my mind. The weight of 3 generations of family history pressed down on me. By morning, I was no closer to a solution, just more angry and frustrated. Then, over breakfast, my brother Earl, who'd retired from farming years ago but still lived on the property, asked the question that changed everything. "If you can't use your access road," he said casually, stirring his coffee, "what roads can you legally use?" Earl's question hit me like a bolt of lightning. If they were forcing us off our traditional access routes, then we had every right to use the public roads, like any other taxpayer. The main highway that connected Paradise Hills to the interstate ran right past our property line. I called Frank back immediately. "If we move our equipment on public roads, we're within our legal rights, correct?" "Absolutely," he confirmed. Agricultural vehicles are permitted on most county highways, as long as they're properly marked with slow-moving vehicle signs and follow safety regulations. They can't stop you from using roads that your tax dollars help maintain. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. I gathered my crew around the kitchen table, Pedro, Miguel, and the others, and spread out a county map. "They've blocked our direct route," I explained, tracing my finger along our now-blocked access road. "But there's nothing stopping us from taking the long way around, right through the main entrance of Paradise Hills and down Highway 16. Pedro's eyes widened as he caught on. "That's the route all the HOA folks use to commute into the city each morning." "Exactly," I nodded. "And farm equipment has a maximum speed of about 25 miles per hour on public roads. Sometimes slower when pulling implements." Miguel, always the practical one, raised a concern. "Boss, that route is 3 times longer than our regular one. It'll burn a lot more fuel, take more time." He was right, of course. This workaround would cost us in fuel, in time, in efficiency. But right now, it was our only option to save the harvest. And if it happened to inconvenience certain Paradise Hills residents in the process, well, that was just an unfortunate consequence of their own actions. We spent the rest of the day preparing. I made sure every piece of equipment had fresh, slow-moving vehicle signs, working lights, and proper safety markings. We reviewed all relevant traffic regulations to ensure we'd be in perfect compliance. My brother Earl, despite his arthritic knees, insisted on helping. "I want to see Janet's face when she realizes what she's done," he chuckled. We worked late into the night, coordinating a precise schedule. Our heaviest, slowest equipment would need to move during morning hours to reach the eastern fields on time. Those morning hours, coincidentally, aligned perfectly with Paradise Hill's peak commute time, when residents left their gated community for their offices downtown. As the sun set, Pedro asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "Do you think they'll try to stop us from using the public roads, too?" "They can try," I replied. But even Janet's husband can't rewrite state traffic laws overnight. Agricultural vehicles have had right-of-way protections in this county since before any of us were born. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. We had a plan, a completely legal, above-board plan, and we'd be ready to implement it at first light. I set my alarm for 4:30 a.m., about 90 minutes before the Paradise Hills morning exodus typically began. Sometimes the best response to unreasonable demands isn't loud protest or angry confrontation. Sometimes it's malicious compliance. Dawn broke clear and cool that Tuesday morning. By 5:30, we had our entire fleet lined up along the property edge: 3 tractors, our combine, 2 flatbed trucks, and a sprayer. All perfectly legal on public roads. All painfully slow. Remember, I told everyone, safety is our top priority. Follow all traffic laws to the letter. Use turn signals, maintain proper following distance, and never exceed the posted minimum speed. Pedro would lead in our oldest tractor, followed by Miguel and the combine. I'd drive the mid-sized tractor with Earl riding shotgun, while the rest of the crew followed in the remaining vehicles. A perfectly legal convoy of agricultural necessity. At 6:45 a.m., just as the first Mercedes and BMWs began streaming out of Paradise Hills, we pulled onto Highway 16. I'll never forget the look on the first commuter's face, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, coffee cup in hand, suddenly confronted with a procession of farm equipment moving at exactly 18 miles per hour. One by one, the luxury vehicles piled up behind us. Some honked impatiently. Others tried to pass, only to encounter oncoming traffic and fall back in line. By 7:15, the backup stretched all the way to the Paradise Hills entrance gate. Through my rearview mirror, I spotted Janet's silver Mercedes stuck about 20 cars back. Even from that distance, I could see her gesticulating wildly on her phone. Earl gave her a nudge and nodded toward her. He turned, saw her, and burst into laughter. "Think she's calling the police?" he asked. "Probably," I said. "But we're not doing anything wrong." Sure enough, a county sheriff's cruiser appeared about 15 minutes later, lights flashing. Deputy Miller, who I'd known since he was a boy, pulled alongside and rolled down his window. "Morning, Jim," he said, barely suppressing a grin. "Getting some equipment moved?" "That we are, Deputy," I replied. "Our usual access road got mysteriously blocked off, so we're taking the scenic route today." He nodded slowly. "I heard about that. Any idea how long this operation will take?" "Hard to say," I told him. "With our access road blocked, we'll need to move equipment this way for the foreseeable future. Harvest season, you know." Deputy Miller glanced back at the now substantial line of delayed commuters. "Well, you're within your rights on a county highway. Just keep those slow-moving vehicle signs visible." With a tip of his hat and what looked suspiciously like a wink, he drove off.